And then we have our whole list of books in the game that we can refer to. But whenever we start something new, we go and examine what has been done before, what can we say that's new, what can we say that potentially contradicts old stuff, because we like the unreliable narrator, we call it, so that you never know what the real truth is. It's always from somebody's point of view. But then after that, when we start a new zone, I make a book, my team makes a book list. These are the books we want to make sure we cover for this zone. And that'll include things related to quests, things related to the monsters and the environment, to the history, to the lore of the area, and then just some fun stuff like, the Brave Little Script books, or Netch, or one of those, we'll do some fun stuff as well.
But just to add one thing, we also have a dedicated position called the Lore Master, who reports to Bill. That's Michael Zenke. And part of his job is to comb through some of those resources and also our existing material, because all of our stuff stays in the game. And the nonfiction designers do a wonderful job of searching stuff and saying, hey, wait a minute, that's not right. Or we already told this story, or a Nord wouldn't do that. Whatever a Nord wouldn't do, I don't know.
Yeah, the Lore Master is a really interesting position. We've had it since the beginning. Lawrence Schick was our original Lore Master, if you may remember that. Shout out to Lawrence.
He'll be here tomorrow.
Yeah, he'll be here tomorrow. He's going to be on our panel about
Nobody tells me anything.
tabletop to taberna, or whatever we called it.
You're on that thing. No.
But the Lore Master now, Michael Zenke, used to be Lehman Tuttle as well. And their job is to make sure that we don't screw anything up. And to tell Art, no, you can't do that, or things like that.
Well,
Actually, Bill has a great philosophy, and you want me to say it or you want to? Okay. So his philosophy is, don't tell me you can't do that. Tell me how you can do that. Next question, because I have a mic. This is a big Q&A. If you don't ask questions, then we're all on to get sandwiches or something.
Hi. Thanks. I only introduce myself to you, Bill. I'm really curious, maybe CJ, I'm not sure who to ask. I teach history of magic here at the University of Amsterdam and Albany, and I really like so far what you find organically in the game. There was sort of lacking magical stuff, and then you've got grimoires, and I just wondered, how did you come up with the idea of grimoires and scribing, and then where did you go and do research for it? Because it's such a cool addition to the game.
I mean, I can't take any credit or any kind of ownership of any of that. That was all Kira's team. We had a dedicated team. We knew we were going to put a new feature in. We knew it was going to be sort of spellcrafting adjacent, but we didn't want to call it spellcrafting yet because it really wasn't spellcrafting, right? But we wanted to take a step towards that, right? And we wanted to put in a new interesting system. We put that team together, and Kira has been the leader of that team since day one. And they've had a writer, with them, working with Bill to make sure that the ideas like that were flowing. I don't know if you have any insights on it.
My Lore Master, Michael Zenke, was the writer doing that with them, as well as Julie Comstock, another one of my writers. And we looked at what's been done before in Elder Scrolls, and that's where we start from. And we always start from there. And then if there's nothing that exists, we see how can we make something from the real world into Elder Scrolls. And it's just a lot of brainstorming, research. We pull art for suggestions, we give it to CJ's team, and then they turn it into something that looks cool.
And so the describing quest, the tutorial, and the whole quest you need to unlock, we felt it was so important. We actually put one of our zone leads, Jason Barnes, one of our more creative designers, on that quest, and Vicky, I can't pronounce her last name. But she's one of our other designers. Sorry, Vicky. She worked with him, and they did an absolutely Ferrer. I'm going to try that. Ferrer, Vicky Ferrer. She's in Hungary. We have people all over the world designing stuff, and the two of them work together to make this striving quest, which is practically the size of a zone story, really.
It's getting great reviews.
It is.
We're playing it here on the show. So thank you.
Next question.
Thanks. New player here. Beautiful game. Thank you so much for your efforts. With regard to storytelling, do you have a team that consults with, for example, scholars or historians for inspiration for a lot of the content? I mean, just because I'm a PhD student of Pete, and the University of Amsterdam, there's a whole center dedicated to esotericism, and there's so many rich themes that are elaborated beautifully in the storytelling in ESO. So do you have an interface with historians, or do you have like an internal research team? Just curious.
We do the research ourselves. The lore master does a lot of it, but then the individual writers and designers will also do their own research for whatever story they're telling. And you know, long ago I was at a panel in San Diego Comic-Con, and I was watching science fiction writers talk about their process. And somebody asked, how do you do your research for weapon fighting? And James Rollins, who writes the Sigma Force novels, but he also has a fantasy series under a different name. They got to him, he was the last one to answer the question, and he said, you know what I love about writing fantasy? I just get to make shit up. And we do the research, but then we make stuff up.
Mead.
All right, he's talking about quests. From the early game, from the launch game, happens in East March. I think it's called A Friend in Need is the name of the quest. And my designer, I was the writer for that quest, my designer thought that mead was brewed like beer. And that's how she wrote the whole quest. So I had to first figure out, that doesn't sound right. So I learned more about how to make mead than I ever need or want to know, so that I can make that quest actually make sense and be accurate. And we do that all the time. How to make wine, how to make beer, how to make, you know, whatever. We make sure that the designer isn't just phoning it in, and we make it better.
Yeah, certainly sometimes when we say we do our own research, sometimes that will mean contacting people who we know how to do things as well, get it explained, or looking it up. Like I did a very nautical heavy quest, and I had QA come back to me and say, oh, you got port and starboard backwards. And I'm like, you know what? And the reason I know is because I have a brother-in-law who's in the Navy and who I consulted about this. And I'm like, you want to tell a captain in the Navy that he's wrong? You go right ahead. I'll be on the phone with him. Next question.
Okay, talking about making shit up, like you said, where did you get the amazing and like otherworldly inspiration for the Daybreak plane of Mirror War? And are we going to tell a little more about that?
That's mostly me, originally. I basically we had the idea of this new Danger Prince, so I wrote a 5-page document on her background, who she was, what happened before she was forgotten, where she comes from, what her portfolio is, and how she interacts with the other princes. And to do that, I started by making a list of all the princes, listing out their portfolios, finding out if they were mostly representative as male or female, so we wanted to balance it out so she became female. We saw where we had holes, and you know, we had some holes around Himaeus Morris stuff, and then he made a good villain, so it all went together. And then the idea that her realm was shattered and she had reflections, and then we worked with CJ and stuff to come up with the whole look of the cracked sky and the realm that used to be beautiful and reflective and then was cracked by what happened to her.
Bill's right, that is the way it happens. But yeah, it is so much a collaborative process. When you ask who came up with the idea, everybody on the team can really take some amount of credit. All the designers on the main quest, all the fiction writers, all that, and of course the artists.
Everything we do is a team effort, but it starts somewhere.
Start someplace, and we get, you know, when we get an idea like that about the character, like our artists, like, and that's juicy stuff, right? Like a forgotten Danger Prince damned by another Daedric prince and maybe a fight between two Daedric princes. Holy crap! Like that's juicy stuff. It's not given anyway. They found that out. They know what happened. I won't read from it, but yeah, it's great stuff.
Acabo de spoiler un poquito.
I'll tell you the next time I'm with a character, I think I'm going to just go through our cosplayer out there who's cosplaying Adele and just ask her, what do you want to cosplay? Because man, she couldn't hit that out of the park any harder. Next question?
Hands in the air, please, if you want to ask a question so I can find you. Oh, there's a lot of you. Sorry.
Okay, well, but
We'll get back to you.
Hi, I'm Kroulin. So correct me if I'm wrong. I've been playing ESO for 3 years, and I understand that it takes place on its own kind of timeline, or it takes place way earlier, at least. Alright. So I've just heard an interesting
It's set
story.
800 years before Skyrim.
Okay, yeah. So it's
But it's the
quite.
same world, same universe, just 800 years earlier.
Okay, well, thanks for clearing that up. That's good to know. So I was just wondering, you guys are working with a lore master, so you probably get quite a lot of freedom to do new stuff because it's way earlier. Okay, well, I'm curious about that at first, and I think I'm probably wondering, one of the cool stuff that you guys are doing right now is, I guess, creating a new dated prince, which is major stuff. Do you have any examples of other things that you guys have done that you're very proud of, like something new that you've created that doesn't really exist in the other games?
Well, I think we're proud of everything we've just created. I know I am. What else? Oh, you have one?
yeah, so what we tend to do, and Bill talked a little bit about this, is yes, we do create things, but we also like to start with I like to call the kernel of truth. Elder Scrolls, since its inception, has been very good about putting out rumors and stuff like that, never really being super definitive about this is what exactly happened. There's always room for interpretation, unreliable narrators, that sort of thing. So we always try and take some sort of cool little bit of lore and then expand on it, almost like a little seed that goes into a big flower bush. One of my very first quest, in fact, was in a place called Still Rise Village in Shadowfen. I don't know how many of you have played that, but it's a place where you find out that there are a group of, you may know what the name of that race is? The ones that died from the flu? What? What was that? Yes, the Cathrini. So there were not supposed to be any Cathrini left alive on Nirn at all. They were all supposed to have died out. And I found a loophole. What we did is we said that there was this whole village of Cathrini. When you roll up there, you see what a person who meets the description of a Cathrini. And you find out, as part of the quest, that the Cathrini, when the flu was killing them all, prayed to Clavic Ismail to help them out. And he's like, sure, I'll help you out. And he turned them all into undead. And so they've basically been cursed with undead ever since then. And you actually get to run around as a skeleton as you take on their curse. And at the end, you have to choose whether to let them live as undead or die and finally be at peace. And so that's an example of how we make something up, but we still derive it from the Elder Scrolls lore. I like it anyway. Maybe nobody else does.
I got asked a similar question a day or two ago, and it's hard to pick a favorite child, right? But a couple of years ago, we got to do Greymore, which was us returning to Skyrim, right? It was the return to Skyrim since Skyrim. My personal favorite moment in Skyrim is Blackreach. It's that moment where you talk to a crazy dude in an ice cave, and then you go into another cave, and then you emerge out, and suddenly you're in like an alien planet, right? It's a Willy Wonka moment. It's that moment where you step into the candy factory, and you can't believe that something this imaginative is in front of you. And in Greymore, they let us go back to Blackreach, but they let us do it in a new way. So not only was it an opportunity to revisit a favorite place from a game that is my favorite part of that game, but it was a chance to add to the lore of that game. I mean, it's a special thing to be able to get to do that.
You asked a little bit about Bethesda and our approval process. Basically, they just approve the big picture stuff. All the little stuff, we're allowed to do whatever we want to. But we know where our boundaries are, and we stay within them. We don't want to run the world any more than they want us to run it, right? So our goal is to make it as Elder Scrolls as we can. That's our job. And beyond that, we have little stories, we have big stories. Also in that Greymoor package, I love working with the Grey Host. That was a new, something from the past that we brought back, and we got to play with them and make them more understandable. And we do that all the time, so that's just the way we look for those little nuggets, as Ed said, and then we expand upon them.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Hi, so some of the chapters like Morrowind or the Markarth part of Greymoor built back on the previous games, and there's still like a feeling that's very new. Is there a difference in how you approach that when you start design?
From a story perspective, we want to make sure that whatever story we're going to tell fits that region, that leads to what comes next, or at least doesn't contradict what comes next. But beyond that, a lot of it is art, so I'll let CJ deal with that.
We understand and are very aware of how important Elder Scrolls is to so many people, right? This is a pat speech that I get to a lot, but I'll give it again. Like, we understand that this game connects people in a very real way. Like, in our game especially, people meet and get married and have children because they played this game. People connect over Skyrim, over Oblivion, over Morrowind, and that's all of the lore and all of the writing and all of the specialness that's a part of that is very real and very important to people, and I take that seriously. So when we are going back to a place that we've been in a previous Elder Scrolls game, we respect that a lot, and we want to make sure that we don't stomp on anything, right? We want to treat it with respect and deserves.
I know when I'm working on the zone design document, which is one of the first major things that's disseminated to the rest of the company. It's based on something Bill has given me, and we worked out with CJ and everything like that. I go through any lore or content that's been done, like with Western Skyrim, since that had been actually so recent, comparatively speaking, I had to go through and say, what are the things we absolutely have to have, and how closely do they have to cleave to what's going to happen 800 years later? Like certainly, certain major geographic features, you're like, we gotta have this. Certain places where it's like, oh, this is an ancient ruin. Well, 800 years is pretty old, but in a world like, Tamriel, it's not ancient, so that better be there. Well, what are things that we can change? What are things that we can adapt? What are things we can foreshadow? That's one of the funny things, is we're sitting here foreshadowing what's gonna happen 800 years later. That's why we're not in an alternate timeline. We're like, no, this is stuff. So there is one line about King Spargrim in all of Elder Scrolls. And so it's like, okay, we're gonna riff off of that line. But we also knew solitude had to exist, and it had to look kind of like solitude there. And cities get rebuilt, everything. But that giant geographic arch, what are you gonna do? And we like that. Gives us a connection. Next, please.
Back there, you have in the back.
Back to the topic of Azalea, the moment y'all get the option to create a brand new Days of Friends, I can only assume those creative juices start to flow. And I personally want to know, what are some of the cut or scrap or early concepts of Azalea that didn't make it to the end of the game?
I was going to say, at least not that many from what I wrote. They followed what I put together, and what we built upon from there fairly well. What happens is, because my documents aren't that long or detailed, we're adding layers, not usually taking them away.
One thing I will say is originally she had 3 arms.
I love that.
No, it's not what we, like we said, we expand upon her stuff. And one of the things we wanted to do with Miramore and Atelier is we wanted to make her and her realm seem very odd and unusual and not fitting. That's why we have, a three-legged creature there, but yeah, originally we were talking about possibly giving her 3 arms, and we cut that pretty early because, for one thing, I don't want to give too much away about the story, but we wanted her to be somewhat sympathetic, and the more alien we make her, the harder it is for you to empathize with her.
We definitely explored a lot of different visual options for her. As Bill said, he had a pretty solid idea of what he wanted her to be in terms of her character and sort of the way that she moved through the story. We were given free rein to explore outside of that. I mean, we had versions where she was wearing straight up armor, like complete armored, sort of warrior kind of an ideas. We definitely had ideas where her body features were more demonic and kind of more on the sort of like ball side of demonic like appearances, but we got away from that because the wings were a big thing. I mean, the notes on the wings were, don't make it look too much like a butterfly or an angel. Because well, we're giving a beautiful woman wings. How far away from an angel can we get, right? And she still kind of looks like an angel, but we did what we could. So those kind of back and forths happen a lot.
Thank you.
Questions? Anyone else?
Back there first.
So on the topic of creating something new, making things up, or even kind of fitting with a continuity of the world of Netherlands and Yale, and not to like put on any pressure or anything basically just know. One thing I'm curious of is if anything will get like a kind of reveal why affiliate can exist now, but not 800 years later.
That's an excellent question. Yes.
Right next to you.
Right there. Wait.
I'm an editor-writer in my life outside of ESO, so there's people who experience when I say I know how many integrations, stories, texts could go through. My question though is, has there ever been a storyline or a short quest or something that has been pretty much perfect from the beginning and didn't have to go through any major changes?
Yeah, a lot of them. I mean, we always iterate because, like, if you've watched our last presentation, things start out really basic and then we build from there. But a lot of the basic stories stay the same. It's usually places where we get changes are moments in the main story because it develops and we need to make it all flow together. And then sometimes a quest is just not working for whatever reason. Or in another case, at the end of the process, when I do my review for VLOC, if you heard our last presentation, that's the process, I found out that we had 2 quests in the same delve. One was a daily, one was a delve quest, that were both about a bath. And I'm like, that's not good.